All right, week 3, stupid versus the spread. Pretty great college football this past week, Mike. I mean, Alabama, Texas did not turn out like everybody thought they would. Ewers is out at least for next week, if
I
not
think I think a month and a half. So
month and a
I
half. Yeah.
heard somebody say today 6 to 8 weeks. Originally they said 2 to 4, but
So in any case, Alabama did not cover. I mean, are they? Was that the most disappointing performance you think for Alabama this past week?
Yeah, and you can call this a hot take. Even with Notre Dame and A&M, I think Alabama's performance might have been the most disappointing because I think there's we had this conversation week 1 with Ohio State. Are there real flaws to be worried about with Alabama now? And yes, there are. The
Yeah,
way
yeah,
I, I I'll give I think David Ubben, who's a writer for the Athletic, threw this stat out today. Uh, if you take out the McClellan's 81-yard touchdown run, Alabama had 16 carries for 42 yards. That's 2.6 yards a carry. Um,
Jesus.
so like they just didn't manhandle Texas's defensive line, which is good, but nothing spectacular the way that everybody thought they would. And then I think he also said that 14 of Bryce Young's 27 completions went to running backs and tight ends. Um,
Not
which
good.
which if anybody watched that game, you knew that stat line existed because my biggest takeaway was that the Alabama 2020 Alabama and at the back end of last year when Alabama really found their groove, they were they blew up Georgia through Jamison Williams, and they blew up the rest of the NCAA when they beat Ohio State by 4 touchdowns to win the national title because of their superior talent outside. And it was glaring, yes, or Saturday, sorry, against against a Texas secondary that is nothing to write home about. That nobody could create separation on the outside, and that is
Right.
going to be a problem for Alabama going forward against way better SEC defenses. So I
And
think,
secondary specifically.
yeah, secondary specifically.
Like
So I think,
Alabama was flying to the ball a lot of the times, and I think that might have been the hype of the stadium, hype of the crowd kind of thing. But like their front seven looked really good on defense against Alabama. I think that's also concerning, honestly. Like
yeah, no,
they
good.
they're 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 not that good to have done what they did to Alabama. Is what I think.
Yeah, exactly, and it's the concerning part is that going forward this Alabama team might have to win a little bit more with defense than everybody thought they would because I think you probably thought they would get through a couple games doing that this year, but not consistently. You expect with Bryce Young coming back with the transfers they brought in, they were going to be dynamic offensively, and they aren't. They really aren't. So I think I'll give David Ubben credit again. He brought up a good point today, in that I think we kind of forget about how vulnerable Alabama looked for most of last year. They played Florida really tight on the road week 2 last year. They had close games against Arkansas, LSU, Auburn, and then lost to Texas A&M. So when you before they got to the SEC championship game, nobody really thought that the Alabama that we saw last year go to the national title game was a real national title winner over Georgia. Um, so I think that there's a chance that's the kind of team we're dealing with this year, and not in that they're gonna take a step back and the sky is falling in Tuscaloosa, but I think that this is a truly now a very open title race with there. I don't know if everybody's all the way in on Georgia being as dominant as they were last year. Ohio State has
I
shown some
am.
vulnerability. Yeah, I mean that's what I mean. I think we are, and we can talk about that game later. But I think if you're in on them, Ohio State has shown a little bit of vulnerabilities. They probably didn't dog walk Arkansas State the way that we thought they would yesterday. They did, they eventually pulled away, but wasn't wasn't overwhelmingly convincing early. And Alabama's got its flaws, and I think that transitions to my next point is like, is anyone good?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
Like
variety.
really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of variance right now. I mean, Ohio State played okay. Bama obviously this past week did not do well, and like the talent level is there based on the 4 and 5 star recruits they have. It might be on paper one of the best college football teams of all time, but like whether it's on field chemistry or whatever have you, it they didn't pull it together, and maybe that's playing a good team in Texas, week 2 and not and getting basically their best ball. But I mean, besides Georgia, OU looked okay. I mean, they're kind of becoming one of those like ones that I'm keeping my eye on for a possible run, just because they're covering a lot. They're playing good ball. I mean,
they didn't
USC.
cover. They didn't cover this weekend, which was extremely disappointing.
Yeah, I mean,
That
when
sucked.
the spread is like 32 and you let up a field goal at the end.
Well, no, they had. I think it was 4th and 1 with 6 minutes to go, and they were on Akron's 29, and they couldn't get the first down. Uh, that's brutal because
Yeah,
they're
I
going
mean,
in to go up 37, and Akron is never gonna. They won. For those who didn't watch the game, Oklahoma won by 30. They would have won by 37 and covered, and we would have went 2-1 in the parlay. But they can't get a 4th and 1 on Akron's 29 to seal the deal. Just a brutal loss on that bet. But yeah, I do think they are good. But continue.
yeah, but there's just a lot of variation right now, and I think Georgia has probably been the most consistent. I mean, aside from maybe USC, who just hasn't played a team like to match up with the skill level necessarily. Although this past week, they were only 9-point favorites, but I think right now, if you're looking at the board, there's a large gap between Georgia and then the number 2, 3, and 4 ranks. And I think that's what we thought Alabama would be, and obviously this past week showed us otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. I I think we'll see. I think Bama. So I'm looking at their schedule right now. They get Louisiana Monroe at home, then they get Vanderbilt,
Poor
and
Vandy.
then they go to Arkansas.
That's going to be a
Uh,
tough game.
uh,
I
yeah.
I mean, I like Arkansas. I think they're probably one of the top 15 teams in the nation right now.
Oh, absolutely. They go to Arkansas, then they get Texas A&M at home, which we all know about the storylines going into that game, although the juice is taken out of it slightly. And
Yeah, well,
then
because A&M's fucking tragic loss. We can talk
yeah,
about that later.
um, and then they go to Tennessee, get Mississippi State at home, and go to LSU and to Ole Miss. That that stretch, they are going to get if there's blood in the water, which there shouldn't be by then for most of like Alabama will probably smoke Louisiana Monroe and Vanderbilt. But if Arkansas plays them tough, the rest of the teams in that stretch have a very good shot. More than one of them have a very good shot to beat Alabama.
I think too, you might have that like potential look ahead with Arkansas in that schedule that we're talking about, right? Because they go to Arkansas and then they play A&M at home. A&M beat them last year. There might be a slight look ahead where you're like, oh fuck, we got A&M next week, and you're forgetting about putting away Arkansas. And Arkansas is very good. Sam Pittman, very good coach. Been saying it all year, all last year too. Like, I think there's potential for upset there. As far as like other under the radar, maybe not talked about as much, but probably show some potential teams. I liked BYU. BYU played Baylor last week, went to double overtime, swung out with the win in second or third overtime, something like that. Second overtime, but there's teams out there like Arkansas and BYU that are you know upper echelon teams that I think we're kind of overlooking if this really does become like a blood in the water for Alabama and others situation.
Yeah, I was very. I had Arkansas on the card against South Carolina. We kind of talked about that, why Arkansas wasn't getting more love at home against South Carolina, and South Carolina looked competent. I will say
Yeah.
that, and but Arkansas's effort really impressed me because they jumped out. They South Carolina had some chances they missed, but Arkansas did what good teams do. They capitalized on mistakes by South Carolina. They limited the mistakes they made, jumped out to a quick lead. South Carolina brought it back to about 10, I believe, probably late in the second quarter, early in the third quarter. And then Arkansas just put their foot back on the gas and showed that they're a good team. That's what you expect good teams to do. Yeah, you said it. Sam Pittman's a hell of a coach. KJ Jefferson's a great quarterback. Um, and they play great defense. I think his name is DJ Sanders was everywhere in the first quarter. Alabama transfer to Arkansas. I think Bumper Pool is number 42, who was the linebacker we all knew about, but he was incredible in that game against South Carolina this weekend. He's a stud. And they like if they get Catalon back, who's an All American caliber safety, and some pieces on that defense, Arkansas is going to be really, really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple other teams. I'll let you gush over BYU, but Kentucky looked very impressive going into the Swamp in a game that probably could have got away from them pretty early. They really sputtered on offense to start. Will Levis didn't look great, but they stuck to their game plan, ran the football really well, wore Florida down, and looked like a very, very capable, dominant, experienced, composed team.
Yeah, they played very, very well.
Yeah, they're going to be tough for anybody to play. I wouldn't expect them to have what don't I wouldn't take them in massive spreads because that's just not their game. But in any game they play this year, outside of maybe Georgia, where it's going to be close. You got to look at Kentucky and say you probably think they're going to find a way to win just because of the way that they play. And then Tennessee, I thought Tennessee looked they easily could have let that one get away from them against Pitt early in the game. They were down, I think, 14-3.
Yeah.
And Hendon Hooker brought them back. They figured it out on offense. They played Pitt really tight. Great effort by Pitt. I think you were on Pitt. Pitt's a lot better than I thought they were. But Tennessee really showed that they can go win a tough game on the road, and play a game where it's not an absolute shootout. Which their offense kind of stalled a bit towards the end and obviously at the beginning. So those Kentucky and Tennessee, that game is going to be a very fun watch.
Yeah, October 29th.
In a couple weeks. That's going to be a great game, and I'm really excited for that. Those two teams are very good.
Of Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, the three SEC teams that aren't basically Alabama, Georgia, but arguably would be number 3, I guess. What is your rank of them? Like, where do they rank? And I'm granted, we're going to find out between Kentucky, Tennessee, but Arkansas won't play either of those teams until if they got to either a bowl game or an SEC championship. But of those, what's your ranking?
This is very difficult.
Yeah. Well, and based on that ranking, Kentucky, Tennessee, what's the line?
Well, so Arkansas, so Kentucky, for reference, Kentucky, Arkansas, and Tennessee are 9, 10, and 15 in the AP poll. Wow. My gut says Arkansas, even though they played at home against the worst opponent, impressed me the most this weekend. Mm-hmm. With just the way they mentally approached that game, the way that they came out and played. I think.
I mean, KJ Jefferson, Jesus. I mean, it's not like they had some sort of like crazy passing game. I mean, they ran the ball.
Yeah, no, they're physical. They have a great offense. I think their average offensive lineman is 6'6", 330.
Jesus.
So
Yeah,
like
they had
they're
like 300 yards on the ground between four different running backs, three
yeah.
different running backs. Yeah, like that's pretty
I
fucking awesome.
yeah, I think hmm, I'll go with I think Arkansas is the best team right now. I think
Okay,
Tennessee has the most potential, and I'll say Kentucky's probably going to be the most consistent throughout the year. So I'll dance around that and give compliments to all three of them.
okay.
So I think, I think Arkansas right now is probably the best team. I think they have a ton of experience. The offensive line looks great. I would say Kentucky's next only because they they did. I mean, granted, it's a tough place to play, but Florida isn't a particularly overwhelming defense. It took a little while to get clicking, and their offensive line is probably not as. They had to replace some starters they lost from last year. I think that could rear its ugly head down the line. But Will Levis had a mixed bag, but did what he needed to do. And then Tennessee, it's tough because I don't think I go back to I don't think Pitt's offense is overwhelming, and the defense just didn't show up in that first quarter. I think there's still some defensive issues that they can clean up. And Hendon Hooker does make some mistakes that make you scratch your head at times. So I think if he can clean those up, the Tennessee is the most dynamic offense. So that's why I say they have the most potential. Um, but yeah, all three of those SEC teams are going to be really, really, really good. And I, I wouldn't be surprised at this point, based on the way Bama played last week, if Arkansas wins the West, especially with A&M kind of sputtering, LSU taking a loss. Mississippi State's good. I don't think anybody's given Mississippi State enough credit, and that's a preview to my card this week. But overall, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Arkansas is the West champ, and they could make a run at the playoff if they only have one loss. I think two loss, even in the SEC championship, might be a little bit difficult. But
Right.
if they get through the West somehow unscathed, two losses, if it's a loss to A&M at a neutral site or Bama, even at home, or a one-off game they lose them. I could see Arkansas in the playoff. The way that they're playing right now, they looked really, really good. The defense, Sam Pittman's got them playing. I love Arkansas. I love the way that they play.
Yeah, no, they're
Um,
playing fantastic.
they're going to be
And I
fun.
think they surprised a lot of people. I would say I think Arkansas is going to look the best coming out of the season. I think Tennessee is the better team, so I would go Arkansas, Tennessee, then Kentucky. But I think what you're going to see is Tennessee has a gauntlet of a schedule. So they play Florida 2 weeks from now, then they go to LSU, then they have Alabama before they have a week with uh, like an FCS team, and then right back to playing Kentucky, Georgia, and then they finish up with Missouri and South Carolina before going to Vanderbilt. Like I think it's probably pretty reasonable to think of those games, Tennessee will probably lose four of those, right? Between Florida, Alabama, Kentucky, LSU, Georgia, Missouri, and South Carolina, I think 3 to 4. Um, so I think you'll see them worse than Kentucky, to be honest, in like rankings. But I think Kentucky probably isn't the better team. But again, three great teams, and I don't hate your pick that Arkansas might go to the college football playoff, especially with typical neutrals like Notre Dame probably having been eliminated this week. Unless they go on some sort of miracle run and crush some
Yeah, I
really
think
good teams.
same thing for A&M.
Yeah,
They would
I
have
don't.
to
I
they'd have to win the SEC to honestly to make it at this point.
correct. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you'd have to have a Texas A&M SEC winner for
Yeah.
them to make the playoffs. I think at this point. Um, but speaking of the teams that did that to them, the Fun Belt, Sun Belt. So Sun Belt Conference, for those like who don't know, they've really like really stepped it up over the past 10 years. And I mean, this week alone, Sunbelt teams beat Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and Nebraska. Like that, there's going to be some good teams coming out of the Sun Belt. And I think maybe because it's a G5 conference, like not a lot of attention was paid to it, especially not as much as the AAC. But Sunbelt might be like a really fun competition to watch coming out, especially in conference games. Kind of as we go forward in the season. Do you have a favorite Sunbelt team there, Mike?
Um, who favorite Sun Belt team? Um, well, I'm gonna say App State because it makes North Carolina look better. Um,
Yeah, I mean App State probably I think the favorite to win right now. Um, Coastal Carolina's not bad though. Raging Cajuns sometimes come out firing, and Georgia Southern, beat Nebraska this past week. That's why
yeah,
Scott Frost is fired.
Georgia Southern's a 2 touchdown dog this week, which I guess they're just looking at it as that they won their Super Bowl, but I have no idea. I mean, as far as the Sun Belt goes, you have to give them credit for what they've done in realignment. Um,
Yeah,
in going to get teams that are really that are football schools that are passionate about football, um, and that's
and
that's their
smaller
bread and
time
butter, and that's
programs
it.
too. Yeah,
That
not
and
not
that's
huge programs.
Yeah, exactly. And that like JMU, Old Dominion, like those. I mean, Old Dominion beat Virginia Tech, and
Yep.
App State took it North Carolina to the wire before they beat A&M. East Carolina almost beat NC State without a couple missed field goals. Um, no, I mean, they have done an incredible job, especially in I guess, their Eastern division
Hmm.
with the teams they've compiled. I mean, top to bottom: Coastal, Georgia Southern, James Madison, Marshall, App State, Old Dominion, Georgia State. Georgia State played North Carolina to a touchdown finish. This week too. That's a program that's been coming along. Another one out of the FCS ranks. So I mean, they've done an incredible job with their football, with the way they've organized their football, and they deserve all the credit in the world. I mean, they go out and they knock off 2 of the top 10 uh, in one weekend. Their in conference games in the East this year are going to be so much fun. Every week they're going to be appointment television. I hope they put them on like Thursday nights just so they're out by themselves because they're going to be incredible.
Yeah, no, they've honestly been a lot of fun to watch for a while. I just think as of like this past week, they obviously showed themselves to be pretty competent. Scott Frost coming out of Nebraska, getting fired. Do you think that should have been a week zero thing? Because I do. Because like the whole narrative behind it was right with his buyout. It's 15 million right now. They fired him, so it's 15 million. And in about 3 weeks, it would have been half of that. So I think the idea was like, oh, let's save 7.5 million by waiting. But obviously, with the loss, as I think 14-point favorites, 16-point favorites this week, Scott Frost is fired from Nebraska. Interim coach, I'm guessing, for the rest of the year. I think they just should have gotten rid of him last year. I don't think he's a bad coach. You just can't have that like narrative behind it almost where you were 3 and something, 3-10 in one run or one score games. But it just doesn't make sense. It almost feels like they kind of wasted this season by not firing Scott Frost last year, or at least after the week zero loss and trying to make up for it. I don't know about what your opinion on it is.
Yeah, I think nostalgia probably overrode where any other coach would have been fired last year. I think that they wanted to be loyal to one of their guys. And I mean, the athletic director came out and said it this summer that this wasn't an opportunity they would have afforded to anybody else. Do I think they should have fired him week zero? No, I think depending on how you come back from that, it's not as bad as last year. Who they lost to somebody in Illinois. They lost to Illinois in week zero, which I guess you could say is as bad because it's Northwestern, but it was also an international game. So I I could see a world where you say, oh, you know, I can see how it happens. That it not now, obviously the whatever the fake punt and all that went along with that first loss, kind of, maybe you do. I thought if they were in it this long that they were just going to ride it out and pay the lower buyout. I would assume he's not getting the full 15 million. I would assume he's getting a number somewhere in between, probably like 11. Um, just because they probably said, we'll just make you keep coaching until your buyout drops, and then we'll pay you 7.5, or you can take, 5 mil off the top, and we can end this right now.
Yeah.
So I would guess that's probably what happened. Uh, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I, I don't
There
know where Nebraska goes because, like,
yeah, I
you're.
mean you really have to take a year. Honestly, it's going to be next year. Like what do you do? You maybe go 6-6 and get a bowl game. Is that a victory? No. Like you
I
got
don't
a new
think they're
coach
going.
in the
I don't
offseason.
think they're going to a bowl game. I don't.
No, I don't either. But I'm saying like at this point, that's the victory, right? Like a bowl game,
Yeah,
6-6.
yeah,
That's your go-to.
yeah. No,
Uh, I mean, so kind of moving on. You wanted to talk about kind of rebound candidates because we're about to start talking our bets. But you had some ideas on rebound candidates from last week's
yeah.
performances.
I so there's fundamental flaws with Notre Dame and A&M that were exposed by Sun Belt teams this week.
Yeah.
I think A&M's performance I can chalk up a little bit more to inexperience in a game they probably weren't focused on. But they still, Evan Stewart looked fantastic. He was a top 15 recruit this year. But everybody else on that offense besides A-Chain, they couldn't get it done. And they're more alarmingly, I think, for A&M, their defensive line got dominated. And App
Yeah.
State ran all over them. And that's a point, Jimbo rode this recruiting class to the number one ranking largely because of what he was able to do on the defensive side of the ball with this class. And they're all freshmen, so I get not all of them are playing, but you can't let an FCS team come to Kyle Field and run the ball the way that App State ran the ball, and I think, I mean, I joked about North Carolina earlier, like who's laughing now, but uh, North Carolina put up 63 points on this defense, and Texas A&M couldn't put up 20. Like it I think A&M has a
Yeah.
chance to rebound. I don't know if Haynes King is the guy, and that's probably not a hot take to most of Aggie land on the Texas X message boards right now. But I think that there's a chance that a new QB could spark them to raise some of the potential and the expectations of what we had for them going into the year.
Hmm.
I still think they're kind of a couple weapons short of being a really potent offense.
I
Um,
do too. I do too.
and then Notre Dame, I think, probably the more glaring, they just need to make a change at quarterback. Like Buchner had ample chances to win that game. The defense kept them in that game despite the fact that they're playing an FCS team. But when you're playing an FCS team, if you're a top 10 program, I don't care what state your offense is in, you go out and beat an FCS team by scoring more points than they can. And
Yeah.
the fact that they only scored what, 15, 12? I
Yeah.
think somewhere in there, you only scored 12 points against Marshall. They threw two red zone
They
picks,
scored.
and
So they scored 20-21.
I think there was a garbage time touchdown there, right? I think it was 15.
Uh, it might have been them coming. It wasn't really garbage time. It was like them coming back. They scored 14 in the fourth quarter, so they only had 7 points first half.
Going into the fourth quarter, they only had 7 points. That's
Yeah.
that's unacceptable, and that's Notre Dame has the athletes to be able to play better on offense. And Drew Pine, he did throw a red zone pick late in the game when Buchner got hurt, but he also drove them down the field in about 40 seconds to get them there.
Yeah.
I
And I
think,
mean, Tyler didn't do so well. 18 for 32, only 200 yards, two interceptions, no
yeah,
touchdowns. I mean,
one of
that's
them was the game ender. I mean, uh, you've if Notre Dame makes a change at quarterback, they could be back and back to being good in this case. Like I said, you expect them to go out and put up 30 or more against an FCS team. But what you really need if you're Notre Dame, the defense is still good. Marshall played really well on offense in order to score the amount of points they did. They got helped out a lot by the way their defense played. But um, Notre Dame just needs to be able to score in the 20s. And their defense is going to be good enough to win them most of their games on the schedule that's left if their offense can put up in the 20s. I mean, we saw it yesterday. That the game script is totally different for Notre Dame, especially if they can force teams to have to play into the teeth of their defense, as opposed to where Marshall was leading for large parts of that game.
Right.
Notre Dame's defense becomes even better than the scoreboard was this weekend. So I think you could see A&M and Notre Dame rebound, especially if they change quarterbacks. I think Notre Dame is probably the more immediate candidate because I think it was clear even from the limited game time yesterday that Drew Pine has a better command of the offense than Buchner does. But the last team I think is a sneaky rebound candidate this week is Oregon, with BYU coming in. We're gushing over BYU. BYU with a huge emotional double overtime win against Baylor at home, a higher ranked team.
Great game.
This is
so much fun to watch.
Yeah,
So much fun to watch.
This is a prime spot where an Oregon team that had a lot of expectation coming into the year, they went out last week and dominated their tomato can that they played. I think it's going to be a very difficult game for BYU. I'm staying away from it because if BYU goes out and wins this game, they're for real. But I think Oregon's a team that if they come out and they beat BYU by a couple scores, I honestly wouldn't be that surprised.
Well, let's get into our bets. I went 4-1 last week. BYU kind of saved me, got me into the plus money because I had 2 units on it. What about you?
I was 6-6 overall. I'm 11-11 on the year, perfect 50%. But parlay was 1-2 last week, thanks to Oklahoma not figuring out how to run the ball on 4th and 1 and get a conversion. So the parlay picks are 3-3. That parlay is down about 2/3 of a unit. So not great, but we are looking towards the future. We are exactly 50%, so we are exactly average.
I think I'm just under 50%, but so I'll run. We'll kind of run through the cards here. Only game of note really for Friday is Florida State at Louisville. I think FSU is going to win this game pretty handedly. The line's only -2. I'm taking a -2. It's one of my picks this week. I don't know if you have anything for that or the Air Force or Wyoming games. But those are the only 2 Friday matchups, unfortunately.
Florida State's the better team. The only thing that scares me is road favorites weeknight games. A lot of times last year, road favorites struggle in weeknight games where the campus doesn't have anything else to do. They get wrapped up in that atmosphere.
Yeah.
Louisville got off the schneid with a big win last week. If Louisville was 0-2, I think it honestly would be a lot better for FSU. But 1-1 going to UCF, which was not an easy game to win, and they went out and did it. I think there's going to be a lot of energy in the building for Louisville with Florida State coming in. I think Florida State is the better team, but not necessarily. They don't necessarily have the experience to go out and win a game like this. They did go to LSU, so I stay away from it. I don't hate the pick. If I was going to pick it, it would be FSU. I'm scared of road favorites weeknight games.
Both these teams also are 2-0 for the under hitting. So they're playing each other. 54.5 is the number. I'm going to look at that. I might take that. All right, but rolling into Sunday. Do you want to go in any particular order? You want to go first?
No, you can go first.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of bounce around here. There's no real rhyme or reason. But I'm looking at Oklahoma -11.5 against Nebraska. A team that has shown they can't really put it together. Fired coach. I get sometimes the guys get up and play late in the season for like a coach they like, but this doesn't seem like that. And Oklahoma's been playing well, and I think they're going to continue that streak. So I think they'll win by 2 touchdowns. So minus
Yeah,
11.5. That's
I think the big concern is the interim bump. We've seen that. I almost had them in the parlay. I took them out just because I always feel like that's it's one if you lose on that and the interim bump and let's say Oklahoma wins by 7, you're gonna be kicking yourself because you just saw it coming. So I'm gonna it's on my card too. Oklahoma minus 11.5. I'm extremely confident in it. It's just that's the only tickler in my head. If Scott Frost was still there, this line might be 21. But the interim bump is gonna run the public onto Nebraska. They are at home. I still think they've got too many flaws because I think we said it we said it before the season, man, and we were dead on that this Nebraska team nobody understood the hype because their offensive line is so bad, and the one thing that Brett Venables' team did in a game where keep in mind I'm mad at Oklahoma because they didn't cover, but they were down 3-0 until 2 minutes left in the first half. They didn't score until 2 minutes left in the first half, and they went into halftime up 7-3. It was dead. Oklahoma was dead, and then they
came
woke
roaring
up
back.
in the second half. Yeah, but what I will say is that something that probably Lincoln Riley's teams wouldn't have done is their defense kept them in that game, and they gave up a lot of yards between the 20s, but they played really well when across the 50-yard line. And I think that's Brent Venables in putting his imprint on this program already. So I love Oklahoma to go in to play with a little bit of attitude in a big environment. Oklahoma minus 11.5. Yeah, I'm so close to putting it in the parlay. I just think I'm a little scared off by the interim bump.
Yeah. They haven't named an interim coach, so that's why I'm still on Oklahoma minus 11.5. Get it before the line starts really moving because I think it's going to get to 14 by kickoff. Honestly,
yeah.
I have Michigan minus 47.5. They have named their sophomore quarterback as the starter going forward. We talked about that in 2 back-to-back episodes, but Michigan kind of figured out who they wanted. They wound up with J.J. McCarthy, who's the sophomore. He went 11 for 12, 220 yards, 3 TDs against Hawaii. That's nothing to write home about, but I plan on having him perform well, especially after being named the starter. So I'm going with Michigan minus 47.5 to cover against Connecticut, who, let's be honest, is a bad team.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say is it was clearly obvious to anybody who watched Michigan any part of the past 2 years that J.J. McCarthy is clearly a more talented quarterback.
Yes.
More athletic guys. I think Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman raised the point before the season started that this was probably Harbaugh's way of naming J.J. McCarthy the starter without
naming him the starter.
Yeah, demoting a senior who carried him to a Big Ten championship to a backup because he was able to let Cade McNamara start the opener. McCarthy then started the follow-up game. Clear to anybody who watches that J.J. McCarthy's the better runner, the better thrower, the better deep ball thrower. Their offense is just significantly more dynamic with him. So, J.J. McCarthy's the guy. Michigan, they haven't. The problem is they just don't have enough tough teams on their schedule early in the year to get the value, but they're another team where nobody's talking about them, and they're just going out and killing teams. And they're gonna keep doing it. So I'm waiting. I'm waiting for a team that gives us the opportunity to really see what they can do and to really get some value on the line. Because I think nearly 50 against UConn, they may cover it. They may decide they just don't want to keep playing anymore. Like they could win. They could win 47-10, and you go, they should have covered, but they just stopped playing. So I don't know. I don't hate the pick. They're going to be really good. I'm waiting on Michigan to get into some more competitive games before I bet them to just start crushing people.
I'm keep on rolling here. I got Cincy minus 20.5 against Miami, Ohio. I think Cincy better team. 3 touchdowns doesn't seem like a lot. KSU Tulane over 49. Tulane likes to air the ball out. Kansas State has a good offense, good defense. Might give Tulane some trouble, but Tulane has one of like the top 8 right now. Passing offenses based on like certain metrics, big play metrics. So I think you need a football player too in there, and that over hits. I have BYU +4. Um, I I think BYU has a chance to beat Oregon, and I think taking 4 points is nothing to it. Oregon, obviously, very good team, favorite still. I just haven't watched BYU for the past couple weeks. I think they're putting together something special. Whether it comes to fruition or not remains to be seen. But I'm going to take the points. Houston -10. Um,
Can we go back to the BYU game for a
yeah,
second?
yeah, yeah.
So this will be a very interesting test for Oregon because they've the last 2 games against Utah, they got manhandled. Against Georgia, they got manhandled. BYU has a bunch of 36-year-old offensive linemen who are going to attempt to manhandle them. We'll see if Oregon finally grows a spine under Dan Lanning in this game. If they do, this is going to be a very exciting game. If not, this could be a game where, and you're all over it, BYU goes out and wins by two scores, and we're all saying Dan Lanning has his work cut out for him with the program of Oregon. But if they have a spine and they show up in this game physically, it'll be fun.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the game of like the 2:30 slate, 3:30 slate. That should be a lot of fun. I'm on Penn State -3 against Auburn. Auburn's not a good team. All field issues all last year. Second year coach who hasn't really gotten it together. Penn State ranked has been playing very very well. They go to Auburn, so I don't like that, but I think Penn State is probably realistically like should be a 6-point favorite. So I'm just going to take them covering the -3. Houston -10 against Kansas. Kansas historically not a very good team. Again, one of those things where Houston's at home coming up a loss. I think Dana Holgerson gets his guys going, gets his team motivated,
And
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 comes out.
Kansas coming off a big win for them at West Virginia.
Yeah, this is definitely like not that it's a letdown spot because they're not favorites, but this is like the juice. There's no more gas in the tank for
Yeah,
Kansas
exactly. It's one
coming
of
off
the
a big win.
it's what scared me off of Texas Tech, but
Alabama -50 against LA Monroe. Saban probably killed some kid to show him that's what happens when you fuck up like that.
yeah.
I This is classic Alabama off a bad performance against a good team playing the next week against a bad FCS team. The Alabama might put up fucking 75 on these guys, and I don't think they're going to score. So -50, taking it. Just going to close my eyes, look at the score at the end of at the end of the day. It's a 3 p.m. game, nothing special. And then wrapping up, I have Ohio State -31.5. Again, better team. I have USC -13, Utah -21, and you have a pick that I'm going to ride with on UTSA. The only other game that I was really looking is Mississippi State LSU. Should be a lot of fun to watch just because it should be a good matchup from the SEC side in the evening time. But yeah, I mean, Ohio State against Toledo, number 3 team of the nation. Show me what you got, kind of thing. I didn't see a line for Arkansas, so I was looking at them, but that'll be an FCS, late
Yeah,
or early
that's
Saturday morning line kind of thing. And then, rolling into the evening games, like I said, USC, Utah. I like both those teams this week. Just better teams, better plays. I mean, you're going to get what you're going to get. What about you, Mike?
yeah. So I think I'll start with the parlay. I see USC. Best line I see for USC is -12, 12.5, 13. I don't care. Take it. USC. I don't know. They won 41-28 against Stanford. They covered 9 easily. I don't know what Vegas isn't seeing. So USC had 6 drives in the first half against Stanford. The results were, in order, touchdown, 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 half. Why are they a two? Why are they less than a 2 touchdown favorite against Fresno State? The if you watch the offense, and I don't say this lightly, if you watch the offense that USC played on Saturday against Stanford, it was poetry in motion. Jordan
Hmm.
Addison has real world speed, not like ACC Pitt muddy speed, real world speed. They made that entire first half look like a joke
Hmm.
against Stanford in a game, and Stanford only started coming back because I really think USC just got tired of playing football at that point.
Yeah, they
Um,
were up by like 30. They're like, all right, well, this has been fun. Let's just run
yeah,
this out.
which I think is the vulnerability of this USC team is the fact that their defense doesn't have like the killer instinct that's going to keep teams from coming back on them. But their offense, Caleb Williams looks so comfortable. The Travis Dye looks great. They have another running back whose name I can't remember that they spell him with, who looks fantastic. Mario Williams is their other wide receiver on the outside, who looked incredible. They're getting the running backs involved in the passing game. I mean, it's Lincoln Riley, right? He looks like he hasn't missed a beat from what he had at Oklahoma to what he has now at USC. Their offense looks fantastic, and I don't think everybody is caught up to really just how good their offense is. Take them minus 12.5 against Fresno State. It should be easy money. I know everybody is impressed by what Fresno State did at home against Oregon State, but Oregon State is a team nobody expected to do anything, maybe make a bowl game, and Oregon State still won on the
Right,
road at Fresno
right,
State, which is not a joke FCS team and
right.
not a joke FCS environment, which I think is the bigger part. So if Oregon State can go out and win a game on the road, why is USC only is less than a 2 touchdown favorite at home? And I get it. The LA Coliseum is not the most intimidating environment, but this is enough. USC, Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison all day over Fresno State. Coastal Carolina minus 13.5. That's buying a half point. I think the line's at 14 right now. At home against Buffalo. Buffalo just lost a Holy Cross on a Hail Mary. Do you know what state Holy Cross is in?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest with you. No.
Exactly. Holy Cross is in Massachusetts, but nobody knows that because nobody's heard of Holy Cross. And Buffalo lost to them. And the only reason that this is a 2 touchdowns, Coastal Carolina beat Army week 1, which is not an easy thing to do. Army's been a good football team. They are a good
Very good
football team.
football team. Yeah.
Yeah. Coastal Carolina is a 2 touchdown, only a 2 touchdown favorite against Buffalo, who may be the worst team in the FBS. And the only reason I can see for that is because they only beat Gardner Webb by 4 last week. Granted, not great, but Coastal Carolina did not lose to an FCS team. Buffalo lost to an FCS team. So
Yeah.
if we're taking credit away from Coastal Carolina here in the Fun Belt, I'm riding the Fun Belt again here this week. If we're taking credit away from Coastal Carolina for playing an FCS team tough and winning, why are we not then adding or taking even more credit away from Buffalo, who's very bad, for losing to an FCS team? Coastal Carolina by 2 touchdowns. They're at home. Book it. Utah, and I'm with you on Utah minus 21, third leg of the parlay. South Dakota State, or sorry, not South Dakota State, San Diego State lost to Arizona week 1. Arizona, I gave it out. Mississippi State minus 11 on the road. They go out and win 37-12 against Arizona. Everybody thought Arizona beat San Diego State. Arizona must be pretty decent this year. Mississippi State goes out and crushes Arizona.
Yep.
So Arizona is who we thought they were. Then San Diego State has to be worse than that. Why is Utah a 3 touchdown favorite here? Utah just went out and curb stomped their tomato can 73-7. Utah is for real. That was a very tough game they lost to Florida. They're at home. Take them. Take them hard against San Diego State. Responsibly in Virginia, not in North Carolina where gambling's illegal. I'll say it every episode. The rest of my card, we talked about UTS, or we didn't really talk about UTSA, but I'll talk about it now. Texas is in a huge letdown spot. They're still at home.
Yes.
They go to Lubbock next week. They played Alabama really tough, which I get they didn't win, so it's not technically a letdown spot. But Quinn Ewers, the biggest reason they were actually in that game, is not playing. Hudson Card is playing. probably on one leg, and all of their juice went out the window when they lost last week.
Yeah,
This
this
is
is
this
this is a letdown and look ahead in one.
Yes, in one. And Texas always loses these games. Always. Always when everybody says Texas is back, bet against them. And here it's against an FCS team that played really, really well for most of last year. Lost a couple guys to the NFL, but reloaded and played Houston very tough, who barely lost to Texas Tech, who Texas is playing next week. What I'm saying there is they're on par with those level of teams. This is not a joke game. This is not a game that should be looked past. But Texas and Steve Sarkisian has a huge task to get his team to focus on this game. I don't think they can do it. UTSA keeps this within the number. I'm going to take Mississippi State minus 135 at LSU. Mike Leach, LSU at night. Too much chaos going on here, but Mississippi State's the better team. This feels like a tragic. If you bet the game with the number, Mississippi State -2, you lose this because they somehow win by a point, like call it in overtime.
Right.
But I think Mississippi State ends up figuring out a way to win this game. The Brian Kelly boos get worse because here's the ultimate problem. I still don't think Brian Kelly is a quarterback. I don't think Jaden Daniels is very good. I think not Nussmeier, who's the other one of them just stopped playing football. And then the third quarterback hasn't played at all. And if Kayshon Boutte not there in the headspace, there's nobody else besides Jason Taylor's kid who looks fantastic. There's nobody else on that offense that really scares you for LSU. And if you would have said to me before the year, is Florida State a better team than Mississippi State? I would have said probably not. And
Right.
LSU just lost to Florida State. I get the games at home. I get it's their first. I think they did play this week, so it's not their first home game. But they did have a de facto home game in New Orleans. I love Mississippi State here. They're a very experienced team. They play really good football. I love Mississippi State to just somehow win this game. I may add the under later. Under right now is 55. I know Mississippi State went out and put up 37 against Arizona, and normally Mike Leach's teams play really good offense. But like I said, LSU can't score, and I don't think Mississippi State's going to blow them out. So I like the number here under. I may add it, I may not, but just if you're thinking about it, think about it. I'm going to take Vandy plus 1.5. I thought about hedging
Doubling
out.
down.
What is it?
You're doubling down on your bet.
Yes, yeah. I thought about hedging out of it by taking Northern Illinois, but I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to double down on Vandy plus 1.5. And Northern Illinois hasn't played anybody good. And Vandy, I get it. Hawaii's terrible. And they beat Elon. But they kept. I think they lost to Wake by 10. Was that right?
Yeah, they played Wake pretty good. They weren't as bad as I thought they would be.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they know Alabama coming up the following week. This is their last chance to get a victory. Give me Vandy plus 1.5. I think they win that game. Notre Dame. I'm going to take Notre Dame in a rebound here against Cal. And the only reason I do that is because Cal is a team that's like Notre Dame. They don't play offense, they play defense. And I think that if Notre Dame announces that Drew Pine's starting the game, this number might go back up to 2 touchdowns. I think it opened at 13 and dropped to 10.
Yes.
So I think it might go back up to 2 scores if Notre Dame announces a change at quarterback. Either way, I like Notre Dame in this spot. I think they have to get off the schneid. I think last week was a wake-up call. Their schedule doesn't get any easier after this. They go to North Carolina, which is going to be a difficult game for them. I like the Tar Heels in that game. I will be at that game for anybody one of the 7 viewers who may be there. We'll be at that game. So I like Notre Dame in this spot to get a win. I think they do it by 2 scores. I think it's probably by 2 touchdowns. Give me Notre Dame. I'm riding with you. Purdue -1 at Syracuse. Purdue's about on par with Penn State. I get it. They lost at home. Penn State was the better team. I got it. Syracuse, I think, is better than most people expected, but I don't think they're good enough to keep this game within a point. Give me Purdue. And then I may add later, this will go right down to kickoff. The A&M Miami line opened A&M -8. A&M is now down to a 5.5 point favorite. If
Yeah.
this gets to a field goal, even within 3.5, and I got to buy a point to get it to 3, I might take A&M here because I think there's value there. So that's my card. I've got right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 plays, maybe 2 more. We'll see. But much shakier week than last week. I felt much better about the board last week. Hopefully that means if I'm shaky about it, the refinements that we've done will come up positive.
Yeah, I have 14 plays. I'm gonna follow you on UTSA plus 11. I'm gonna follow you on OU minus. I think it's 11.5. I like that up to 2 touchdowns. I don't think Nebraska's very good at all. I know I didn't talk that much. I'm adding it to my card just because undeclared interim coach so far. These guys are not going to want to get up and play. OU, who's pretty fucking good. With a coach that's unannounced. And I get it. Like sometimes you have that bump. I just don't think that happens without a cult of personality. And I don't think they have that on their coaching staff.
Yeah, I think if they hired Deuce Gruden, I still probably take OU at 11.5. Yeah.
All right. Well, that has been our show. Week 3 college football in the books. Or week 2's in the books. Week 3's coming up. Looking forward to some great matchups, and we'll see y'all next week.